Florida On Demand's Allison Walker. This year at Halloween Horror Nights 20, fear is revealed.
And it is opening night. We're excited.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to the opening night of Halloween Horror Nights 31. We are super excited.
So we're in Halloween Horror Nights.
And we are at the arches. Look at it. Oh, it looks so beautiful.
It's happening. We're here. We're officially at Universal.
Oh, look at the lighting.
Y'all, after a week of being on evacuation and seeing that archway, crying.
How did an idea hatched in the back of a small trailer following a catastrophically low attendance rate at Universal Orlando create one of the biggest Halloween events in the world? How did this one idea shape the growth of one of the biggest theme parks in the nation? Welcome to the Horror Fiends. I am your certified horror dad, Kyle Beatty, and welcome to the Halloween Horror Nights Deep Dive. Today we'll be discussing the entire history of Halloween Horror Nights to answer those questions. And I know what you're probably wondering. Kyle, there is 31 years going on 32 of Halloween Horror Nights so far. How could you possibly cover all of that by yourself and survive? First of all, thank you so much for caring about my well-being. And secondly, I'm not alone this time. Horror Fiends have partnered up with Horror Night Nightmares on their HHN at Home event in the month of June, supporting the Trevor Project in support of the LGBTQI youth. So if you feel like you've learned something by the end of this video, consider leaving a donation to the Trevor Project in support of Pride Month. And that's not all. I've teamed up with some awesome creators you might know if you make your rounds in the HHN and theme park YouTube space. There's some great HHN creators here today, so pop some popcorn, grab your favorite blinky cup, and buckle up, because this is going to be a long ride.
Searching for archive files. One file found.
This Halloween, party with your favorite monsters during Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios, Florida. And right now, carve out savings of up to $16 off admission with this special coupon you'll find on 2 liters of Pepsi. For details, visit a Pepsi display near you. Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios. Hurry to Ticketmaster today for advance tickets, while you can still slash the price.
I don't know about you, but Halloween as a holiday, I feel, isn't as widely celebrated as it was when I was growing up. Just one example I can think of is nowadays, I don't see that many trick-or-treaters going outside on Halloween. When I was growing up, I remember like the vintage Halloween commercials, the Party City one, the Spirit Halloween one.
This Halloween, give them a chill. Come to Party City and dress to thrill. Right now, kids' costumes from $9.99. Adult costumes from $19.99. Plus, turn your home into a house of horrors. Party City. Nobody has more Halloween for less.
And those commercials, that media is what kind of made me love Halloween so much. And I think that is also the reason why I love the vintage early years of Halloween Horror Nights so much. Although I was never able to attend myself, seeing those promos of the old vintage years brings back that Halloween nostalgia that I felt back in the early 2000s. But what really happened in Universal to create such an iconic event? Like I said earlier, Universal Orlando was battling a low attendance rate when it first opened its doors in 1990. The theme park where you could ride the movies was very overshadowed by Disney World, its competitor. In order to boost attendance at the park, an idea was hatched in the back of a small trailer in the summer of 1990. A party. A Halloween party. Thus created the first ever year of Halloween Horror Nights.
I see a very lively group of citizens in front of me tonight. So glad you could come.
It was known as Universal's Fright Nights. Dying for a good Halloween party? This slogan for the first ever year encapsulated this event as a whole. It was, point blank, a huge celebration of Halloween. The park functioned normally throughout the day. You could ride E.T. and meet King Kong in confrontation. But at night, for the first time ever, the park became something sinister. The event was held for 3 nights, October 25th, 26th, and the 31st, and tickets were a measly $12.95 plus tax, very different to the tickets of today. In the official lore of HHN, the ancient god of fear, Adaru, or you may know him as simply Fear, possessed the workers of Universal to create a Halloween event. Through his lantern, Adaru rose Beetlejuice and the classic monsters from their works of fiction into the real world to helm Fright Nights. Although Fright Nights did not look anything like the HHN you're used to seeing today. A huge Halloween parade ran through the park and there was only one haunted house. The house was called the Dungeon of Terror, where guests would travel to a roadside haunt filled with gore and terror. This house was constructed in the now long gone Jaws ride queue. The event was so popular that it prompted Universal to do it again and again. This brought on the legacy of doing this Halloween event yearly. The next year came and guests wondered if Universal's Fright Nights was going to return. Although the Halloween event did return that year, Fright Nights was done. The event was renamed as Halloween Horror Nights.
And in 3, 2, 1.
From Orlando, Florida, happy Halloween and good morning, America!
Halloween Horror Nights was bigger than Fright Nights, and Universal was here to prove that. The second year featured 2 haunted houses, 5 shows, and 4 haunted attractions. The Dungeon of Terror returns for its second year, and the first ever IP was held in the second house, The People Under the Stairs, based on the Wes Craven film of the same name. This was the first year where the now iconic Bill and Ted show was featured at the event. And mayhem hit the streets of New York when a giant robotic dinosaur named Robosaurus was one of the shows. Halloween Horror Nights was again a hit. The event began to gain traction in the media and gain fans. Knowing that this event was just growing, Universal wanted to make this event bigger and better every year.
This Halloween, stick this in your trick-or-treat bag! 4 nights of the wildest Halloween party of the year, with all new Halloween episodes of your favorite Fox shows!
Don't get caught dead anywhere else. Again, the slogan encapsulated the event as a whole. HHN was the place to be in the Halloween season of the 90s. The advertising of HHN Year 3 revolved around a pumpkin being destroyed by a chainsaw. The year featured 3 haunted houses and 7 shows. It was held for 7 days in October of 1993. The houses this year were a combination of IPs and original concepts. The Slaughterhouse was an original concept and was essentially a blood-filled house of horror and mayhem. The Psychopath Maze was a house which utilized the iconic horror property, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Guests would travel through the Bates Motel and experience the horror that was prominent in the film. The third house of the year was the return of The People Under the Stairs. And the most popular shows of the year were Bill and Ted and again Robosaurus. This event was fantastic, but Universal again wanted to take it a step further. How can you instill horror past the houses and past the shows? How can we make guests scared around every turn? One word: scare zones. Or is that 2 words? Halloween Horror Nights 4 was the first year to add the element of a scare zone. A zone in the street that is filled with scare actors ready to cause fear. With every new year, the haunted house count increased. This year had 4 haunted houses. The Boneyard allowed guests to enter the catacombs of an excavated insane asylum. Dungeon of Terror returned, welcoming new victims into the dungeon. Hell's Kitchen was surprisingly not a haunted house about Gordon Ramsay, but was instead a house filled with crazed butchers, ready to serve you up as their new meal. The Psychopath Maze returned once again as well, and the one scare zone that was featured was titled Horrorwood, much like the Ice Nine Kills album. The zone featured the first appearance of the Chainsaw Drill Team. Now, this event was great, but again, how could Universal take it a step further? How about if they had someone there, like a character perhaps, to host the ceremony?
Hello, kiddies. Crypt Keeper here, master of ceremonies at Universal Studios, all new Halloween Horror Nights. With new haunted houses to die for, you'll make some new fiends, play a starring role in a killer show, and lots more.
Don't miss the last 2 weekends of terror. Florida residents save. Advance tickets just $22 at Ticketmaster with a 2-liter Pepsi label.
Party with me at Universal's Halloween Horror Nights. You'll dig it.
Halloween Horror Nights 5 featured the event's first icon. Although it would be 5 more years before an originally crafted icon took place in the event, the Crypt Keeper from Tales from the Crypt was the master of ceremonies for this year's event. The hand behind all of the fear. The advertising for this year prominently used the appearance of the Crypt Keeper and even touted the event as Curse of the Crypt Keeper. The event ran for a whopping 12 nights, which doesn't sound like a lot in current HHN form, but at that time it was a big deal. The year was heavily marketed, but the house count dropped down to 3. Although that isn't all bad news, because the scare zone count dropped up to 2, or went up to 2, I guess. The houses were as followed. The Dungeon of Terror house was rebranded as Crypt Keeper's Dungeon of Terror. Terror Underground Transit to Torment put guests on a journey through the subways of New York with creatures of the underground. So essentially a vintage Descendants of Destruction house. Universal's House of Horror was where guests would meet Hollywood's horror film legends who were back from the grave. The scare zones featured were Horrorwood Boulevard and Midway of the Bazaar. Keep note of that Midway scare zone because Universal seems to use it and love it for a very long time. The Crypt Keeper had a show called The Crypt Keeper's Revenge Nights of Hell. In it, the waters would churn as evil comes back to life to create a large supernatural battle. Oh man, and wait until I get to the 6th year and the 7th and the...
Hey, maybe it's time to pass the baton. Your voice is sounding a little hoarse and some of us are waiting on our turn. Journey into Fear. HHN 6 was just as conventional as the rest of the early years. Crypt Keeper came back this year and ran for 15 nights in October 1996 to early November. The Crypt Keeper's Studio of Terror house brought goers through studio tour filled with monsters. Toy Hall, Nightmare, and Scream Factory, essentially Chucky before Chucky was at the event, was an abandoned toy factory where toys were alive and evil. Universal's new House of Horrors was set in a wax museum where exhibits of the Universal's monsters came to life after a lightning strike. This year only featured one scare zone, Midway of the Bazaar. There was a huge Halloween parade throughout the park named the Crypt Keeper's Festival of the Dead. It featured 5 floats, an army of characters, and at the helm of it all was the Crypt Keeper. Something that scary causes nightmares, and that's why you'll never sleep again.
You'll never sleep again. At Universal Studios, the Frightmare continues with Halloween Horror Nights 7. Only at Universal Studios, you'll never sleep again.
That was the slogan of HHN 7. This year the event was advertised with a small demon named Igor, keeping a victim's eye open and shouting that slogan. This year featured 3 haunted houses, 1 scare zone, 3 shows, and a parade. The Hotel Hell house was set in a trendy New York hotel, which happened to be home to ghosts, ghouls, and a demented hotel staff. Dooms of Terror led you on a journey to a New Orleans cemetery with vampires, mutants, and maniacs with chainsaws. You know, the usual crowd you see when you visit a late loved one. Universal's Museum of Horror returned with essentially the same story that it had previously. The one scare zone was midway of the bazaar. Again, not much else to say about this year, but I do find that Igor guy just a little bit cute.
Who knows what terror awaits? Florida residents, save $10 in advance at Ticketmaster with a Pepsi 2-liter label to Universal Studios' newest terror, Halloween Horror Nights 8 Primal Scream. Grab a Pepsi and satisfy your thirst for terror. The last scream you hear may be your own.
The following year leads us into Halloween Horror Nights 8 Primal Scream. This year donned the slogan, "The last scream you'll ever hear might be your own." And the promo was just a girl screaming at her empty Pepsi bottle. Okay, no, not actually. In all seriousness, the advertising for this year featured a screaming face that terrified a woman. The event this year featured 5 haunted houses, including 2 pairs of interconnected houses, 1 scare zone, 2 shows, and a parade. Ticket prices started to raise every year, with this year's single ticket being $42 plus tax. Universal started to realize that they were sitting on a gold mine and began to sell their tickets accordingly. The Hell's High House took guests on a trip through a high school where a slasher film was being shot. However, when filming concluded, the villains didn't hear "that's a wrap" and just kept going. SS Titanic Carnage Crew, which is a name you'll hear a lot in the HHN community, ventured into a vessel's murky depths, containing a skeleton crew that would tend to your every need. This house was conjoined with SS Titanic Fear in First Class, a house littered with darkened staterooms and ballrooms, haunted by the ghosts of former passengers. Universal's Museum of Horror returned again under the different name Universal's Museum of Horror Chamber of Horrors, but this time was conjoined with another Museum of Horror house, Universal's Museum of Horror Unnatural History. And I bet you can guess what the one scare zone was. Yes, midway of the bazaar once again. Universal seems to really like scary clowns, which is apparent once HHN 10 rolls around.
I don't know.
The 9th year of HHN was advertised in a way that made the guests feel like it was a farewell to the event. It was titled Halloween Horror Nights 9 The Last Gasp, with the slogan simply being Sayonara. Although we know now that the farewell was just a precursor to the iconic HHN years that followed shortly after. The Last Gasp featured a depiction of the mummy in its promotional material. This year, the event featured 5 haunted houses, including the first ever 3D house in HHN history. Doomsday led guests on a journey through, as we've seen before, a warped underground New York City with a new element. It added in the impending arrival of a new millennium as a fear factor, given that this year of HHN was in 1999. The Mummy House navigated you through the depths of a mysterious Egyptian tomb where you would face the priests, who declare that they want to make you and your friends permanent residents. Psycho through the mind of Norman Bates allowed guests to take a step into the horrors of what Norman Bates experienced in his own mind. Universal Creature Features in 3D gave guests the first experience of a 3D haunted house. You were given 3D glasses as you entered, and Hollywood monsters would quite literally jump off the screen. And the one scare zone was midway, but I'm sure you already knew that. And that finishes up HHN's early years. Universal went from a failing theme park in its opening year to finding its footing in the Halloween industry. But it only gets better from here. HHN 10 took Halloween Horror Nights from great to iconic. So I'd like to pass you all the way down to good old Louisiana to the horror and HHN creator Nerd Squish.
Did you miss me? Not afraid of the dark? You don't know Jack. Look out for the new Halloween Horror Nights 10, only at Universal Studios. Florida residents save $10 with a specially marked 2-liter Coca-Cola Classic label or coupon from a participating Taco Bell.
In 2000, Halloween Horror Nights did something that forever changed the event. HHN created their first ever original icon, Jack the Clown. Weeks before the event started, a hot set sign appeared at the front of the park, warning guests beware of Clown. They did this in order to test the character to see if guests would like him, and even though clowns are one of the biggest phobias in the world, Jack was a hit. So for the first time ever, an original icon was used in the advertisements for the event with the slogan, "Not afraid of the dark? You don't know Jack." But I know what you're thinking. Who's Jack? Why should I care about this clown? Let me give you a little background on the dude with the fire hair and the fabulous makeup. James Keaton is the lucky man behind the grease paint that brings the now iconic character to life. And Keaton was born to play this clown. Not only was he nicknamed the Lon Chaney of our generation, but he's played many other characters in the park, most notably Beetlejuice, for over 18 years. Jack is not only a killer clown, but a star performer with a huge ego. He's quick with puns and one-liners to collect as many laughs as he does screams. He loves to be the center of attention. He will, however, show admiration for his little brother Eddie, as well as killers who also have a flair for the theatrical. One person he definitely doesn't like is Beetlejuice. He's been known to throw quite a few insults to the bioexorcist on the other side of the park. Born in the Shady Brook Rest Home and Sanitarium along with his brother Eddie in the late 1800s, John Jack Smith escaped a poor and highly abusive family, leaving his little brother behind to join the circus. He was a performer who loved to entertain children with his practical pranks and pratfalls during his stint with Dr. Oddfellow's Carnival of Thrills. But underneath that grease paint and clown nose is a twisted murderer. He was wanted for the abduction and disappearance for several small children all throughout the southern United States. On Halloween of 1920, the police were closing in on this killer clown. Police officials and FBI soon caught on that all the missing children followed a pattern that led them closer and closer to the traveling circus show. Fearing capture, Jack revealed his sinister secret to Dr. Oddfellow. However, the doctor was also a wanted man, so he wasn't very sympathetic to Jack's problem. He asked Jack to show him what he had done with the bodies of the missing children. Jack revealed the bodies of 13 children hidden in 3 small trunks in his traveling coach. Fearing that the investigation for Jack would lead the police to him, Dr. Oddfellow had Jack murdered and hid his body away along with the victims inside of the House of Horrors exhibit at the circus. Years later, the carnival was sold, and various rides and attractions were split and sent to different states. In the fall of 1980, a television crew from the BBC was documenting the Great Dark Rides of America. While looking for abandoned carnival rides, the crew stumbled upon the House of Horrors in an abandoned Louisiana junkyard. And as somebody that's from Louisiana, that's like every other step you take in the state, so. But this documentary crew was not ready for what they would find inside. They found a series of trunks that had a large wooden box sitting behind them. And of course, like any good old horror movie, when you see a box with a crank, what do? You crank it up. So that's exactly what they did. And when they did, the decomposing body of Jack the Clown popped out. Jack's decaying corpse, as well as the bodies of his 13 victims, were sent to the Louisiana coroner's office. However, the van carrying these bodies disappeared on a Halloween night in the swamps of Louisiana. And later that week, the bodies of the BBC filming crew were found in a grisly state. Now, all of this leads to the year 2000 and the 10th year of Halloween Horror Nights, when Universal Studios bought some of the props from Dr. Oddfellow's Carnival of Thrills, including that box that they found Jack in. And with that, Jack was unleashed upon the unsuspecting guests of Halloween Horror Nights. The event featured 5 haunted houses, 4 scare zones, 2 shows, 2 haunted rides, and a parade, and was held for 19 days in October of 2000. And ticket prices were $44 plus tax. Wow, I wish we could still get in the gates for that price. Our houses were as follows. Anxiety 3D, located in Soundstage 22. In this house, you step inside the 3D virtual reality of the house that Jack built and find yourself trapped in the malfunctioning video game. Total Chaos, which was also located in Soundstage 22. In this house, you wander through a top-secret underground military base where aliens are on the loose. And to be honest, as somebody that has an intense fear of aliens, this is my literal worst nightmare. So I'm glad that I never got to experience this one. The Fear House, located in Nazarmans. This house was centered around Dr. Oddfellow and his evil funhouse. Universal Monster Classic Mania, located in the Earthquake Cube. This house took all the classic monsters you know and love, but made them more grotesque and intense than you've ever seen them before. Dark Torment, also located in the Earthquake Cube. Now this one is super interesting because in order to enter the haunted house, you had to ride the Earthquake attraction. Upon exit of the ride, you would be led into a house that took you into the 7 levels of hell. Our 4 scare zones are as follows. The Gauntlet, located in the Boneyard. This scare zone featured a photo op with Jack along with chainsaw-wielding maniacs. Midway of Dr. Morose, located in Amity. In this scare zone, you would come face to face with carnival misfits. Apocalypse Island, located in Central Park. In this scare zone, you're entering the park that has police barricades, sirens, and lights as zombies rush at you. And Clown Attack, located in Hollywood. For this scare zone, Jack filled the streets with demented clowns. 2 of our most popular shows were Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure, located at the Wild West stage, and Jacked Up, located at the Animal Actor stage. In this show, Jack took you on a journey through his own twisted imagination, featuring acrobatic performances. And just like Jack, I'm back for Halloween Horror Nights 11. With the success of last year's original icon, Jack, Halloween Horror Nights was ready to bring a new original icon to the event. None other than Eddie Schmidt, the chainsaw-wielding, 80s slasher-loving little brother of Jack the Clown. The intention for this year was to make it more intense and brutal than it had ever been. Due to the event coming so close after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the event was retooled and toned down so that it would be accepted for society at that time. With this, Eddie was scrapped at the last minute along with his slogan, "Say Goodbye to Jack." Eddie was replaced by Jack along with his tagline, "Jack's Back." But our icon wasn't the only thing that was affected. Anything graphic or violent was scrapped, removing all blood and gore from the event. I'm talking literally anything that was red or could even resemble blood, so even our red lights were replaced with green lights. Names were also changed. Everything from the parade to the names of the houses, removing anything that would contain words like slasher, terror, or dead. Some of the original titles include Bloodbath Underground, which became Ooh Zone, Terrorland, which became the ever-popular Scary Tales, Slasher Alley, which became Nightmare Alley, and the Festival of the Dead Parade became Nightmares on Parade. The event featured 5 haunted houses, 3 scare zones, 3 shows, and a parade. And it was held for 19 days in October and November of 2001. And our ticket prices were raised just the tiniest bit to $46 plus tax. The 5 houses were as follows. The Mummy Returns, The Curse Continues, located in the Earthquake Queue. Based on the hit movie, guests ventured through a maze of tomb-like corridors in the Temple of the Scorpion King, where danger lurks around every corner. Pitch Black, located at Soundstage 22. In this one, you're in a mysterious zone of darkness where these weird disturbances are occurring. And it's up to you to investigate, if you dare. Run, located in the Earthquake Queue. Sadly, this was supposed to be Eddie's house. In this one, guests are a contestant in a new diabolical game. There are no questions, no prizes, and only one rule. Try to escape without losing your mind. Scary Tales, located in Soundstage 22. In this one, you enter an abandoned carnival attraction that's filled with nightmarish versions of all the fairy tales that we know and love. Superstitions, located in Nazarman's. In this one, you enter a hidden warehouse that's filled with ancient relics and urban legends that'll make you believe in the supernatural. The 3 scare zones are as follows. Midway of the Bazaar, located in Amity. This one was very similar to the Midway of Dr. Morose from the previous year, but just on a smaller scale. Nightmare Alley, located in Shrek Alley. The original concept for this house was to have the chainsaw drill team chasing you around in red fog, which obviously, due to all the other changes that they made, this one had to switch up a bit too. So instead, you would come face to face with slashers from popular movies, such as Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, and Chucky. The Unknown, located in Central Park. This zone featured a gothic aesthetic with gargoyle-like creatures among many other monsters. The two most popular shows were Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure, Back at It Again, and Nightmares on Parade, which was a procession of nightmarish Halloween images. Together, 2000 and 2001 make some of the most legendary and interesting years that Halloween Horror Nights has ever seen.
Oh, catch a body by the toe. If he hollers, cut him low. Eeny, meeny, miny.
Visit the all-new Halloween Horror Nights, held for the first time at Islands of Adventure. 4 islands of fear. Save up to $20 from Coca-Cola. Get your tickets before it's too late.
Halloween Horror Nights 12 was a first for Universal Studios. Located for the first time in a new theme park, Islands of Adventure, it was advertised with the tagline, "Your time has come." Are you ready to meet the Caretaker? Hosted by the Caretaker, the event revolved around his followers and imaginations. It featured 5 haunted houses, 6 scare zones, 3 shows, and a special dance party area, and ran for 21 days, from October 4th to November 2nd, 2002. A documentary that aired on the Travel Channel was filmed during the event, which allowed cameras to film the houses and give background information throughout. But let's take a little deep dive into the icon, the Caretaker. Once a well-respected surgeon, Dr. Albert Kane became the caretaker of Shady Oak Cemetery in Willamette Valley. Kane later converted the Victorian-style mansion him and his family lived in into a mortuary and funeral parlor. For years during his years as a surgeon, Dr. Kane was intensely interested in the inner workings of the human body. What happened to the patients that he couldn't save, and what happens to a person when they die. Kane and his family eventually used the deceased as guinea pigs in very unnatural and bizarre experiments. His demented extended family, made up of blood relatives and deranged assistants, dug up the bodies of both recently and not so recently dead, and used them for either Kane's experiments, their elaborate parties, or simply as house decorations. Kane performed these experiments in an attempt to discover the nature of the human soul. For fresh specimens, Kane would go into the nearby town to find homeless people, and in what seemed like a charitable offer, invited them back to his mansion until they got back on their feet. Instead of helping though, he would perform horrifying surgeries on them, carving them open on the operating table while they were restrained and fully conscious without anesthesia. Kane occupied most of his time performing acts of the base cruelty, chemical injections, brutal amputations, live dissections, castrations without anesthesia, electric shock, and even organ removal. Kane kept notes and audio recordings, but as time went on and his madness increased, these became rambling discussions, often delving into the philosophical. A few of Kane's assistants would sometimes thieve body parts during the surgery when he wasn't looking, to use as dinner ingredients, even going as far as using corpses in elaborate funeral parlor parties. And if that wasn't crazy enough, he also performed experiments in fear and wished to see how much the human mind could endure before succumbing to madness and death, which resulted in at least one person being buried alive. The terrible sight was actually seen by 2 teenagers who decided to take a walk in the cemetery to tell ghost stories. Walking past the gravestones and the various monuments, they heard music being carried on in the wind. Following the sound, they came along the Shady Oak Cemetery, where they witnessed the Kane family dancing with the rotted remains of dead corpses. However, the caretaker wasn't the original icon for Halloween Horror Nights Islands of Fear. Cindy, the demented little daughter of mortuary owner Paul Bearer, was originally the icon of the event. In the event's premise, every land would be ruled over by her playthings: Spider-Man's nemesis Carnage, Nightmare, the Treeks and Fooms, and the Grinch. Unfortunately, after a string of child abductions in the area, Cindy was abandoned and her father Paul Bearer was morphed into Albert Kane. The event nights consisted of October 4th and 5th, 10th through the 13th, 16th through the 20th, 23rd through the 27th, and the 29th and 31st, as well as 2 nights in November, the 1st and the 2nd. The ticket price was $49.95 plus tax. Compared to today, that's not a bad deal. But let's dive into the houses of this year. Maximum Carnage. Venture into the labyrinth-like secret hideout of the malevolent Carnage, an insane criminal with incredible alien powers, who's bent on mindless destruction. Scary Tales 2. Step into the pages of the grimmest fairy tales ever told, where nobody lives happily ever after. In fact, nobody lives. This took place in Popeye and Bluto's Bilge Rat Barges Queue. Fear factor. Imagine a place where your greatest fears become a reality. Feel your way through absolute darkness in a room crawling with insects, snakes, spiders, worms, rats, and even more. This house was located in Thunder Falls Terrace. Project Evolution. Deep within the jungle, top secret genetic experiments have gone horribly wrong, creating hideous mutants, half human, half dinosaur, and all evil. This house was located in Triceratops Discovery Trail. Scream House. There's something disturbing about this small town mortuary. The bodies just don't want to stay dead, and they don't want you to leave. This house was located in Soundstage 20. But houses aside, Horror Nights is also always known for its scare zones, and this year didn't disappoint. Port of Evil, Island Under Siege, Treeks and Fooms, Jurassic Park Extinction, Island of Evil Souls, Booville, and of course, we have the shows that everyone loves. This year featured Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure, as well as Studio 666. This time, they had a new icon. The slogan for this year was, "The director will see you now." The event was located in Islands of Adventure for the second year in a row. The director, also known as Paolo Ravinsky, hosted the event, telling guests that the director will see them now. The event featured 6 haunted houses, 6 scare zones, 2 special shows, and ran for 21 days from October 3rd to November 1st, 2003. For its 13th year, the event's theme was based on the evil mind of the director, a film creator who often did short snuff films in which his victims died on camera. The houses were all sets, and the director himself hosted his own stage show called Infestation, where guests were invited up to live out their fears of horrible creatures. The event's commercials featured a cover of the song "You Ought to Be in Pictures." As with Halloween Horror Nights Islands of Fear, the scare zones were each featured in all the Islands of Adventure themed lands. Only Booville and the Port of Evil returned for this year. An extreme house called Severe Fear was planned to be held in the Carnage Warehouse this year, but was eventually scrapped. For all of you Halloween Horror Nights fans, this was also the first year where the demonic songs of Midnight Syndicate was first featured. But let's get an icon backstory on the director. Paolo, Pavel, Billy, whatever you want to call him, was born in Eastern Europe. Kind of like our ancestors. Aspiring to be a filmmaker, sounds like me. He initially started out as a snuff film director, capturing actual human suffering, torture, and death on his movie camera. His first project was a controversial feature known as The Widow's Eye. The film shocked so much of his country's population that Paolo was forced out, which is when he came to America. Law enforcement agencies and film critics call his work snuff cinema, but the director prefers his work to be referred to as art. Some people found tamer examples of his work, such as The Bloodletting and Death Procession. Paolo was hired by Universal Orlando to film his newest horror film at their Islands of Adventure park. Here, he turned each area of the park into a living horror movie as part of his dream project. The director himself would appear at the All Die-In at the event. He also hosted his own torture show, where he would subject victims from the audience to horrors on stage and film their reactions. The event nights consisted of October 3rd and 5th, 10th through the 12th, 15th through the 19th, 22nd through the 26th, and 28th through the 31st, as well as having one extra night on November 1st. The ticket prices started at $51.95 plus tax. But really what you're paying for is those houses. The houses consisted of the Ship of Screams, Funhouse of Fear, Jungle of Doom, Psycho Scarapy, All Night Die-In, and Scream House Revisited. But what about those scare zones, you might be asking? This year's event consisted of the Port of Evil, Toxic City, Hide and Shriek, Night Prey, Immortal Island, and the returning Booville. And then of course for the shows, you had Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure again, as well as Infestation.
Universal's Halloween Horror Nights, now in 2 parks for twice the fear.
Next up on our list is Halloween Horror Nights 14, and this was another year of first for Universal Studios, as this was the first time that Halloween Horror Nights the website debuted, and the slogan for this year was "What's your breaking point?" and 2 times the fear. Another first of this year is that it was featured in both Universal Studios and Islands of Adventure for the first time ever, featuring 7 houses, 4 scare zones, 1 show, and a parade. The event ran for 18 nights in October of 2004. This year is also notable for its highly immersive website, giving detailed backstories to every house and scare zone. The event nights consisted of October 1st and 2nd, 8th through the 10th, 13th through the 17th, 21st through the 24th, and 28th through the 31st. The ticket price started at $54.75 plus tax. And the names for the haunted houses were pretty dope. They consisted of Disorientum, Hellgate Prison, Horror in Wax, Ghost Town, Castle Vampire, Horror Night Nightmares, and Deadtropolis. And the scare zones consisted of Fright Yard, Field of Screams, Midnight of the Bazaar, Point of Evil, and of course we had Bill and Ted's excellent Halloween Adventure Show and the Festival of the Dead Parade.
Tired from his adventures, the little boy settled into his bed and slept and slept and slept. Wasn't that a good story? Dear, you look a little warm. Sweet dreams.
The Storyteller presents Tales of Terror at Universal's all-new Halloween Horror Nights. This year, no one will live happily ever after.
That is some great insight. Thank you, Hero. But HHN 15, in my opinion, featured 2 icons. Whether you agree with me or not is completely up to you. With the slogan of "No one will live happily ever after," this was the first year of the event where the houses, the scare zones, and the shows all were overarched in one pre-existing story. Located in Islands of Adventure exclusively for the 3rd time, this year's official icon, the Storyteller, also known as Elsa Strict, weave the tale of a Middle-earth meets modern world of Terra Cruentus. Terra Cruentus was ruled by the Terra Queen, who I consider to be the 2nd icon of this year's event, given her large presence throughout the park. The event featured 7 houses and Rat Run, 4 scare zones and the Hollows, and 2 special shows, and ran for 19 nights from September 30th to October 31st, 2005. On peak nights, parts of Universal Studios would be open through Maldakin Pass, allowing guests to ride some of the rides there and experience Rat Run. To understand this year and everything it encapsulates, you first have to understand the icon, the Storyteller. As a little girl, Elizabeth, or Elsa, was visited by a winged creature who wanted to skin her alive. In retaliation, she ate the monster, and in doing so inherited its darkness. She then proceeded to rip all of the stuffing out of one of her dolls and murder her mother with a hammer. As to her role in Fear, or Daru's canon, do you remember that guy? We talked about him earlier. She first transported guests into the landscape of her newest story, called Terra Cruentus. The land was ruled over by the evil Terra Queen, who would oversee the execution of her victims to refill her blood vats. This blood was used to create a ceremonial dagger called the Terrathrone Blade, and it was used on the nightly sacrificial ceremonies. On the final night of the event, the queen herself was sacrificed. The houses featured were Demon Cantina, the School, Body Collectors, Terror Mines, Where Evil Hides, Colorblind Terror, and Blood Ruins. The scare zones were Terror Guard Run, Blood Thunder Alley, Cemetery Mines, and Fire Pits. And the Terra Throne show was very popular. At the end of the event, on the final night, the Terra Queen herself was sacrificed and vowed on her deathbed to return to HHN in 15 years. But all of this year and the previous icon years were all a precursor to the following year, a Sweet 16 birthday celebration. But I can't cover such a momentous occasion all by myself. That's why I'm going to pass you down to someone or some people with a little insight. And that is Miss Chloe and the Irish Will.
Nights turns 16. 4 of the most horrifying figures return to Universal Studios for a Halloween homecoming you won't want to miss. Come, celebrate the nightmare. Halloween Horror Nights hotel and ticket packages start at just $79. Spend the night and see if you can handle 4 times the fear. To book your package, call now or visit HalloweenHorrorNights.com.
In 2006, we had Halloween Horror Nights Sweet 16. The slogan was Horror Comes Home. The event featured the 4 original event icons, Jack the Clown, the Caretaker, the Director, and the Storyteller. They all returned in houses and also in 2 shows.
The houses and scare zones featured were some of the greatest in Halloween Horror Nights' history. It was the first proper anniversary year, and it's thought to be one of the best years ever run.
All 4 previous event icons returned to host this year's Sweet 16. This gave the Storyteller the name Elsa Strict and also changed the director's name from Paolo to Paula. This was the first year that HHN made use of the Sprung tent, and Eddie was finally able to make an appearance in the Run House that he was previously pulled from in 2001.
The event nights for this year were September 29th to 30th, October 6th to the 8th, the 11th to the 15th, 19th to the 22nd, the 26th to the 29th, and the 31st. The price for single admission tickets this year were $59.95 plus tax.
The houses featured this year were Psychoscarapy Maximum Madness in Soundstage 22, All Night Die-In Take 2 in Soundstage 23, Scream House The Resurrection also in Soundstage 23, Run Hostile Territory in the Earthquake queue, Dungeon of Terror Retold in the Jaws queue, Psychopath The Return of Norman Bates in Sprung Tent 1, and People Under the Stairs Under Construction in Sprung Tent 2.
So the scare zones this year were Blood Masquerade in Shrek Alley, Deadtropolis Zombie Siege in New York, Harvest of Souls in Central Park, and Horror Comes Home in Hollywood.
The most popular shows this year was The Arrival in Mel's Die-In stage, Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure in the Fear Factor stage as always, Robosaurus on Peak Nights Only in New York. He would have loved that. Well, so would everyone, but he would have particularly loved that one. And then Sweet 16, the director's cut in the Studio Lagoon.
Hello there. It's me, Jack. Didn't expect me, did you? Well, I'm here to tell you all about Halloween Horror Nights. Press release, smash release, it's all about me. You think you know me? You don't know Jack! This year, I'm bringing the Carnival of Carnage to Universal Orlando. And the screaming will begin September 28th!
So what's my future?
You don't have one.
This Halloween, Jack presents Jason, Freddy, and Leatherface at Universal Studios Halloween Horror Nights. Spend the night and see if you can handle the Carnival of Carnage. Hotel and ticket packages starting at just $89. To book your package, call now or visit HalloweenHorrorNights.com.
So in 2007, they ran Halloween Horror Nights Carnival of Carnage. The slogan for this year was Choose Thy Fear. It featured the return of Jack the Clown as an event icon and the leader of the traveling Carnival of Carnage.
His carnival had brought together a number of attractions for the event, including 3 modern horror icons from New Line Cinema, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, and Leatherface. This was also the first appearance of Jack's Harlequin, Chance. This was also the first time that HHN had won Park-wide Scare Zone. And fun fact, this was the first year I attended the event.
So Jack the Ringmaster, who was previously a member of Dr. Oddfellow's traveling carnival, has been revived multiple times over the years to bring fear to Universal. Now that he's killed his betraying master and stolen his cane of souls, now he leads the Carnival of Carnage and he's brought his own sideshows.
This year, the event ran from September 28th to 29th, also October 4th to 7th, the 11th to the 14th, 18th to 21st, the 24th to 28th and the 31st, and then also November 1st to the 3rd. Single admission this year was $64.95 plus tax.
So the houses this year were Dead Silence, The Curse of Mary Shaw, which was in Soundstage 22, Psycho Scarapy, Home for the Holidays, which was in Soundstage 23, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Dreamwalkers, which was on Soundstage 23 as well, Vampire, Bloodbath, which was in Nazarman's, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Flesh Wounds in the Earthquake queue, Friday the 13th, Camp Blood in the Jaws queue, The Thing Assimilation in Sprung Tent 1, and Jack's Funhouse in Clownovision in Sprung Tent 2.
Also, another fun fact, even though I was at this year, I did not see any of the houses because I was too scared. However, I was on the Jaws ride when me and my sister saw Jason Voorhees like creeping along outside his house, and he stopped and he waved at us and we waved back, and it was very fun.
He's known for being a very friendly man.
He's a very nice person. Then we have our scare zones, which this year they decided to do a park-wide scare zone, but then they were each broken into subsections. So the main scare zone was called Midway of the Bazaar. Then the subsections, we had Treeks and Foons, which was in Shrek Alley, Killer Carnies in New York, the Chainsaw Drill Team in San Francisco, Motor Maniacs in Hollywood and the Plaza of the Stars, and the Troupe Macabre in Central Park. Also, fun fact, these scare zones were terrifying, but the Motor Maniacs did throw beads out from on top of Monster Cafe, which was fun.
So the shows this year were Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure on the Fear Factor stage, Freak Show on the Animal Actor stage, Jack's Carnival of Carnage on Mel's Drive-In stage, and the Rocky Horror Picture Show Tribute on the Beetlejuice stage.
And I was also really lucky that I was able to go to all of the shows this year because I didn't go to any of the houses. But the Freak Show in the Animal Actor stage was really cool. I remember vividly, it was like about ghosts, and he had a big screen in front of him that he put static on. And at the time we all had like Nokia flip phones that had like cameras on them. And we just like put our camera on and put it up to the screen. There was a ghost there. It was like EVP and stuff. It was cool.
Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody...
Bloody Mary.
Bloody Mary comes alive only at Universal's Halloween Horror Nights.
I dare you to say it one more time. Halloween Horror Nights 18 brought something new to the event. The creative team took an already existing figure that everybody knew, made her the icon of 18, and then gave her her own original backstory. And that icon was Bloody Mary, or as the HHN community knows her, Dr. Mary Agana. Universal's creative team introduced the event and its icon Bloody Mary on the Halloween Horror Nights website in July, and expanded its backstory up to and during the run of the event. With Bloody Mary's icon, fears, fairy tales, and urban legends formed the overarching theme of this year's event. With a press release on August 28th, Universal revealed the names and descriptions of the mazes. Visible construction could be seen in August, and major scare zone construction could be seen in September. Although there was no elaborate opening show featuring Bloody Mary, excluding the media event, she made a number of appearances throughout the event. The story started with an individual known as Mary Agana. She opened a facility where she would perform experiments on fear. This would later spiral into a series of events where she became a ruler of evil legends. The theme of the event itself was that guests would step into a mirror and enter a world that contained the twisted, disturbing, yet artistic visions of the violent Bloody Mary. With the exception of the shows, everything in the event was either tied into the legend of Bloody Mary or took place in the realm of the mirror. Bloody Mary in the HHN world has a largely developed backstory. Dr. Mary Agana was introduced on the Halloween Horror Nights website on July 1st in 2008. Website visitors entered her office and read her journal as it appeared in 1958. Her office was shown with a large mirror reflecting her desk, originally shown as clean and orderly. In her journal appeared a letter establishing her as a psychiatrist whose methods were disapproved by the National Mental Health Association, and whose grandmother had died and left many of her possessions to her in her will. Weekly new pages were added to her journal when she took new cases and continued to use her methods even though she had the rejection letter. With each case, it became clearer that her sanity was waning as she tortured her patients with fear. Treating her patients with an immersion therapy for their fears, she sent her first 2 patients to an asylum. However, her 3rd patient was inadvertently killed through therapy. Her next journal entry would show her excitement that she felt about the patient's death, and was accompanied by a change, and her office became more disheveled. With her next case, her writing became sloppier and she scribbled many pictures among the pages. This patient and the next were both killed, although not by Mary herself. She began to question her own sanity in her journal, but continued to see patients. Her next two cases included one of the NAMH doctors that rejected her, and another man, Boris Schuster. She killed the doctor with her own hands and became insane. In one of her last journal entries, Mary continuously wrote the date August 7th throughout the page. Throughout that day, her office aged again, aging 50 years, bringing the site back to present day. Her final journal entry was revealed as the mirror broke open and she became Bloody Mary. A paranormal investigation team founded by Schuster, called Legendary Truth, investigated her office on August 27th, 2008, the 50-year anniversary of Dr. Mary Agana's transformation into Bloody Mary. They revealed her as the inspiration for the urban legend. According to Mary's story in Roddy, it is painful for her every time that she breaks out of a mirror, which is why she screams. For this reason, there was not a main opening show featuring her. The only show in which she did appear was the media-only opening ceremonies. In this show, the investigator brought a mirror and placed it on stage in front of the audience. With the audience chanting her name in a flicker of lights, Mary emerged from the mirror to be interviewed by the audience. The Reflections of Fear House was Mary's own house that year, where guests were transported back to 1958 and uncovered the secrets behind the doctor's facility. Scary Tales Once Upon a Nightmare invited guests into an evil fairy tale world ruled by the evil queen. Creatures followed guests to the Butchered Buck Roadhouse where comic book creatures attacked. Interstellar Terror took you to space as you boarded the NSO Columbus 1492 with a mysterious artifact on board. Dead Exposure was an interesting house where guests experienced an invasion of zombies through the lens of a celebrity photographer. Doomsday was based on Universal's film of the same name, where guests had to survive a post-apocalyptic Scotland ravaged by a deadly virus. The Hollow traveled into an ancient ceremonial ruin haunted by the servants of Samhain, the Lord of the Underworld, to experience the traditions of Halloween past. Body Collector's Collections of the Past was a sequel to the 2005 Body Collector's House. This year, it invited guests to Victorian London, where they were using Jack the Ripper as a cover for their ghastly business. The scare zones were Asylum in Wonderland, Fractured Tales, Path of the Wicked, Schoolhouse, American Gothic, and Streets of Blood.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars are candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Let the game begin.
The most horrifying movies have come to life. Universal's Halloween Horror Nights, the nation's premier Halloween event.
Game over.
Now, Bloody Mary was a fantastic icon, but nowadays she's not really featured at the event. Her existence has vanished. She only appears now through imagery and icon team-up events. Halloween Horror Nights 19 brought you straight to the movies, and I am so sad that I missed that year. It was so film-driven that it was given the appropriate title of Ripped from the Silver Screen. Universal announced on June 25th, 2009 that the year's event would incorporate characters from the movie franchises Child's Play, Saw, and Universal's The Wolfman. Ripped from the Silver Screen's theme surrounded an abandoned movie theater called the Universal Palace Theater. The icon of the event was appropriately called the Usher, or Julian Browning, a mysterious undead usher who haunts and cares for the theater. The Universal Palace itself seems to be an evil entity. It attacks those who do not show it respect, as Julian seems to warn everyone who enters the theater. But let's talk about the year's icon, the Usher. Julian Browning was an usher at the Universal Palace Theater, a popular movie house that had been converted from a playhouse during the 1920s. Browning truly enjoyed working at the theater and loved the movies, especially horror movies, becoming something of an expert. However, Browning was also very strict about enforcing the rules and hated rude patrons who disrupted the movie experience for others. During a 1940 re-release of his all-time favorite film, The Phantom of the Opera, starring Lou Chaney Sr., Browning engaged in a scuffle with a rude theatergoer. During the fight, Browning's flashlight was seized by the boorish patron and tossed through the new screen, tearing it. As the furious usher went backstage to retrieve it, he was somehow entangled in one of the old playhouse's sandbag ropes, causing him to die, a slow, painful death of strangulation with his feet mere inches above the floor. It was revealed that this was the first horrible event of many in the theater's history, meaning that either the Universal Palace Theater itself is evil, or Julian's revenge has been to destroy other rule-breaking patrons. With this kind of backstory influenced by film, any theme park known for its contributions to film made this a huge year for HHN. The Silver Screams house was headlined by the Usher himself. The Saw house tested you. The Wolfman house was based on the Universal remake of the same name. Chucky, Friends to the End, brought you into Chucky's world. Dracula, Legacy in Blood. Frankenstein, Creation of the Damned. The Spawning, Leave It to Cleaver introduced you to Sam Meets. The Scare Zones were Lights, Camera, Haction. Cirque du Freak, Horrorwood Die-In. Apocalypse, City of Cannibals, Containment, and War of the Living Dead. But the following year was an anniversary event, and HHN goers like myself are very excited for those. And this year, it was time for someone to finally show his true face.
Run! For 19 years, it's been me. Pulling the strings and watching from the shadows. But no more. Your screams are beautiful.
In the right hands, film is a weapon.
Time for you to meet me. Florida residents save $20 with the purchase of Coke products.
New era of darkness begins. And that slogan, again, was correct. Halloween Horror Nights 20 Years of Fear was both the 20th year of the event and the second anniversary year since Sweet 16. The icon this year was Adaru, the Sumerian god of fear. The website was released on June 13, 2010, with an open audition call and a 20 Years of Fear gallery, featuring a retrospective with pictures and video of events and characters of Horror Nights past. A lantern with 2 X's on it was the main prop of the year, as with Sweet 16's birthday cake, the Usher flashlight, and more. On the website, clicking the lantern's flame released pictures of the past icons, and took you to a page with pictures of props and facades, being a mummy sarcophagus, a facade for a maze in Shadow Creek, and the side view of facade for another maze. A continuation of the previous Legendary Truth campaign was introduced, called Legendary Truth: The Awakening. On August 27, 2010, Fear was revealed. The icon of this year was Fear himself, or you may know him as Adaru, the looming figure who has been present in HHN's lore since Fright Nights, influencing events through an old lantern kept in the Universal Studios art and design department. Fear had been slowly using others to prepare for his eventual return. Early in 2010, around 20 photographs of previous Halloween Horror Nights were discovered with strange burn marks forming a bizarre pattern. An online paranormal research group, as we have mentioned, named Legendary Truth, analyzed the photos and discovered that they were each a piece of a puzzle depicting a symbol. Assembling the puzzle at around 9:00 p.m. on August 24th, the art and design building at Universal Orlando suffered a blackout as the demon inside was released. Soon after his release from the lantern, Fear began to manifest himself over various electronic media in the month leading up to Horror Nights. The first evidence of this was in a soundbite from a security camera in the Universal Art and Design building during the blackouts. At first, the noise sounded like a voice speaking gibberish, but when played backward, an ethereal, gravelly voice could be heard speaking a message. Soon after, videos began appearing in the Halloween Horror Nights website, where Fear began speaking through the previous icons, his 5 heralds. Jack the Clown representing chaos, the Caretaker, death, the Director, sacrifice, the Storyteller, legend, and the Usher being vengeance. They claimed that the previous 19 years were only the beginning, and that a new era of darkness would soon arrive. All of the original crafted icons return this year, and they were posed as messengers for Fear's plan. Fear himself was present at the park, and man was he huge. The Horror Nights Hallowed Past House let guests travel into a realm where Horror Nights wasn't just a seasonal event, but an actual reality. The orphanage, Ashes to Ashes, brought Cindy, the caretaker's daughter, into the fold with her own house. Hades, the Gates of Ruin, brought you in the underworld, where you came face to face with the most terrifying creatures of legend. Psychoscarapy, Echoes of Shadybrook, was Jack's house. Other houses this year featured Havoc, Dogs of War, Catacombs, Black Death Rising, Zombiegeddon, and the legendary Truth, the Wyandotte Estate. Scare zones were HHN 20 Years of Fear, Fear Revealed, Zombie Gross, Escureto Muerte, Saws and Steam, and The Coven. This year was huge. It brought all 20 years of lore all together in one event, with a looming figure connecting it all together. It almost felt like the perfect send-off for the event. Luckily, HHN is never gonna have a send-off, and Universal wasn't done quite yet with their originally crafted icons.
Red, you win.
Be careful what you wager.
Black, you lose.
When you play with Lady Luck. Halloween Horror Nights 21, only at Universal Orlando Resort.
House always wins. Although HHN 20 showed you the leader of the icons, HHN 21 introduced you to a brand new icon under Fear's control, Lady Luck. On June 28, 2011, the theme was confirmed to be No One Beats the House. The website was also reopened with a new intro showing a severed hand holding 2 cards. Lady Luck was the icon of this event, and every house contained an Easter egg of her in it, whether that be on a poster or a poker chip. Lady Luck was a shape-shifting succubus that has been around since man began taking chances. It is believed that the ancient people associated her with Tyche, the Greek goddess of luck, or her Roman counterpart, Fortuna. Apparently, Lady Luck actually causes bad things to happen with those who gamble with her and lose. Bad things also happen to people if she gives them a choice and they make the wrong one. Just 1 year before the closing of Shadybrook Rest Home and Sanitarium, a prisoner named Floyd Mercer hung himself and left behind a notebook full of quotes about luck. It turns out that he was the only known person to gamble with Lady Luck and survive. Floyd witnessed one of his friends, Benny, play poker with Lady Luck by his side, and he won. Later, Floyd saw Benny being killed by Lady Luck in her true monstrous form and her minions. These minions were her past victims turned into monsters with spade-shaped scars. He escaped when she saw him and faked being crazy to be put into an asylum where he could survive. Eventually, he realized that Lady Luck found where he was and hung himself. Since then, Lady Luck has made sure that everybody has made an extra gamble. She could also be found in a large dark room with her roulette wheel, what she would use to torture her victims. The houses this year were Nevermore, The Madness of Poe, The Forsaken, The Thing, Saws and Steam, Into the Machine, HR Blood and Guts presents Holidays of Horror, The In-Between, Winter's Night, The Haunting of Hawthorne Cemetery, and Nightingale's Blood Prey, with the scare zones including Acid Assault, Canyon of Dark Souls, Grown Evil, 7, Night Maze, and Your Luck Has Run Out. You had to enjoy HHN 21 because it was the last time you'd see an originally crafted icon for a very long time.
Visit HalloweenHorrorNights.com.
Now join me, if you will, in talking about the IP years of Halloween Horror Nights, or well, the beginning of the IP years, and that is 22, 23, and 24. And if you can tell by the covers of the maps, these are also the Walking Dead years. So let's dive straight into HHN 22 right now. Now, HHN 22 began September 21st and ran all the way through October 31st of that said year. And the prices started at $88.99 plus tax. So I mean, not too bad when you really think about it. And since I have the map here for the event, I'm going to go into the map and read off what the houses were by location. And here, I'll show you guys the map so you guys can see we're going to start off with location A, which instead of being a soundstage like it typically would be for this map setup, it is in the disaster queue. And if you guys don't remember disaster, it is where Fast and Furious is right now. And this first house is The Walking Dead. And the description says, band together as you escape infection and face hordes of walkers from AMC's hit The Walking Dead. There's no way out. This was actually the first year that we had The Walking Dead featured at the event. And honestly, from what I heard, this was a pretty good house and it featured everything that you wanted to see from the very first season of the show. And we're gonna go to B, which is the next house here, and this is our first soundstage location, and this is another IP, which is Silent Hill, and this is based on the video game. So we go, dare to venture to the ghastly town of Silent Hill, where an alternate dimension of horrors await. Nothing is what it seems. And it's pretty cool to see this because this was the first time ever that we had a video game property at Halloween Horror Nights. And honestly, it's hasn't panned out to anything as of yet, but at this year's Horror Nights, this year being HHN 32, we have The Last of Us, which is also based on the video game. So it's cool to see that so long from like splits, we have a brand new video game property. And now going from that to C, we have Alice Cooper, Welcome to My Nightmare, which on the map is a little confusing because if you look on the map, it has all the intellectual properties on one side and then the originals on the other. Well, kind of, but I'll get to that when I get to that. But C here, typically on a normal Horror Nights map, would be located in the sound stages. This time it is located at a sprung tent. It's just very confusing at first. But this is, and I quote from the map, face your demons in legendary rocker Alice Cooper's twisted mind and bear witness as horror and music become one. And this is really cool because this is actually the very first time that we had a house that was based on an artist, which we recently had at this last Horror Nights last year with the Weekend After Hours Nightmare. So it's kind of cool to see how much incorporation the IP years started for this whole thing, because so far we have a television show, a video game, and a musical artist. Now bouncing off of Alice Cooper, we are now going to another set of gentlemen, a set of magicians, if you will, in Penn and Teller, Nuked, Vegas. Now this house was in 3D, so keep that in mind, and it is, and I quote, world-renowned magicians Penn and Teller have accidentally nuked Las Vegas. But don't worry, it's part of the show. Or is it? Now, this is incorporation of some really good 3D. I love a 3D house, but we haven't had one at Horror Nights recently. And honestly, this shows how much fun you can have with a 3D house. It's a completely original concept, but tied into an IP. So, it's really cool to see. Now from D, we're going to go to E, which sends us back to a soundstage, and it is our first original house that we're going to talk about, and that is Dead End. Now in Cary, Ohio, the Hartford mansion was cursed after horrific acts occurred inside, and the truth is the deadliest part of all. Now going from E to F, just like the alphabet, we're going to our next original house, which is Gothic. By day, the Cathedral de Comentum Animus is being restored. By night, gargoyles that keep watch come alive. Now, I did not get to experience this haunted house. However, I did experience a segment of it, which was featured in Jack Presents 25 Years of Monsters and Mayhem, and it was honestly one of the most scenically beautiful houses, and that's what I've heard from a million people, that this is one of the most beautiful houses to ever come out of Halloween Horror Nights. So, kind of cool to see, I'm not gonna lie. I wish I could have experienced something like this, but it's really cool to just hear that it was one of the most beautiful houses ever. And now going to our final house, which to me is up for debate if it is an original or an IP, and that is House of Horrors, which is located in the Parade Building. Now, it states here, face the original monsters of terror in blinding black and white as lighting slices through the surrounding darkness. Now this means the entire haunted house was in black and white. Now, you heard that correctly. Black and white house. Just like the movies. So, I've heard mixed things about this. People loved it, people hated it. But I never got to experience it, so I can't give you my opinion. However, I think this is an IP because it's based off of the Universal Monsters, and I feel like those are IP originals, so it's weird. It's a weird, like, churn. Now we're gonna go from the haunted houses to the street experiences. That's right, they're not called scare zones anymore. They were scare zones the year before, but they're not scare zones right now. We have, I'm just going to read you what these scare zones are, and I'm pretty sure you can get the idea of these because these are just roaming hordes. So, we have the Inquisits, vampires, beasts, warriors, prisoners, and traditionals. Now, it's kind of cool. This was a completely new concept for Horror Nights. It wasn't just one standalone scare zone in a land. This actually went across the entire park, and they were moving. It was pretty cool, and it kind of tied into the Legendary Truth a little bit because everyone had their different like emblems and logos above them, so it was kind of cool to see. Now we're going from the scare zone or street experiences to the shows, and the shows, well, you know one of them because it was a long-standing staple for Horror Nights for a very long time. It is the time-traveling duo of Bill and Ted in Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure. Now, this show doesn't change much from year to year. It's just pop culture at its finest, having fun at Horror Nights. This was one of the most fun shows ever to be at Horror Nights because it's so many people's iconic memories. And now going from that to the other show, we had 20 Penny Circus Fully Exposed. Now, if you're not sure, this was essentially just a magic show, and I'm gonna read the description here because it's not something that we typically have at the event, and it is: the 20 Penny Circus brings their magic for people with questionable taste to an unsuspecting Halloween Horror Nights audience. And with all of that, that is HHN 22. And we're going to go from here to here, and we're going to talk about HHN 23. Now, Halloween Horror Nights 23 saw the event begin on September 20th and was extended through November. That is November 2nd to be exact, and the event ticket started at $91.99. And now, this was the return of The Walking Dead, like I stated prior. And just like last time, we're going to go into the map, which now it seems like they understand the concept of a map because everything's in order. And this was actually my very first year of Halloween Horror Nights, so this is actually a year I really wanted to talk about with you guys. So we're going to start off with A, which is the cabin in the woods. Beneath this cabin's rustic appearance lies a secret facility that unleashes terrifying beings you thought only existed in nightmares. Now, of course, this is an IP based on the movie The Cabin in the Woods, and if you haven't seen that movie, I highly recommend watching it. And if you haven't seen a walkthrough of this haunted house, I highly recommend watching it because it seems like it was one of the best houses they've ever had. And now we're going to go to B, which was Resident Evil Escape from Raccoon City, and that is the return of another video game property in back-to-back years. Almost as if these are really good concepts. And now it says, duck and dodge lickers, haunters, and Nemesis himself if you want a chance of escaping Capcom's video game terror before missiles send everything back to hell. Now, this of course, like I said, was based on the video game, and the very cool thing to pull out from this haunted house that stood out from everything else was the fact that it had a pause screen. Now, you literally turned the corner and saw a pause screen, and it was one of the characters falling down shooting at one of the clickers, and it was so cool to see. Not clickers, lickers. Wrong video game property. I'm just excited for The Last of Us. Now we're gonna go to C, which was An American Werewolf in London. Based on the John Landis horror classic, you'll travel to the Slaughtered Lamb, experience the attack on the moors, and live the chaos of Piccadilly Circus. Now, this house, when it came back in 2015, was one of the coolest things ever, and this is probably one of the reasons that I have a running fear of puppets in a haunted house. Now, they are one of the scariest things to see. Now, I know you can just say, oh, it's just a puppet, but the use of puppets in this haunted house was phenomenal. So, just letting you know that this house was a great one. And going from C to D, we have Evil Dead. Gruesome deadites try to possess your soul through every creaking floorboard and tangled vine as you relive the most terrifying film you will ever experience. Now, this is not based on the original Evil Dead film. This was based on the remake that released that same year. So honestly, this was cool from everything that I heard. I did not get to experience this haunted house. I was a noob the first year I went to Horror Nights, and I didn't do 3 of the houses. 3 of them which I read already, which was Cabin in the Woods, American Werewolf in London, and Evil Dead. So everything else though, I did. So let's go on to E. Moving away from the sound stages now, we are going into the disaster queue. We have Havoc 2, Derailed. The Dogs of War. A genetically engineered super soldier outfit are bloodthirsty maniacs bent on destruction with their sights set on a speeding train. Now, this house was very unique, to say the least. You walked in and it was a train, and then the train, well, says what it says in the title, and it derails. So you're basically going through a forest and all these soldiers are trying to attack you, which honestly, all in all, doesn't seem like a bad haunted house. yeah, that's all I gotta say. Now going to the next house. This is our first sprung tent, and it is Afterlife Death's Vengeance. Serial killer Bobby the Blade is about to feel 2,000 volts of terminal electricity as his victims in the afterlife wait to seek horrific vengeance upon him. Now this house was a 3D house. The main character was the bad guy. He was the villain. He got killed for his actions of everything that he's killed. And then you walk through this house and you see everything in a different light. You see the newspaper clippings, you see the victims. It's just such a cool sight, and if you haven't watched this walkthrough, do it. Now we're going to go to a haunted house that has a very, very, very special place in my heart, and that is because it was my first ever Horror Nights house, and that is Urban Legends La Llorona. The weeping woman cries for her children, sends chills colder than the depths in which she drowned them. She walks the earth seeking others to share her pain. Now this house was gorgeous from the outside. The facade was essentially just a church, and it had a wishing well up front, and every so often at night La Llorona would have her appearance show up in a ghostly form, which was really cool to see. Trust me, believe me, it was awesome. And now we're gonna go away from the sprung tents and go to the final house here, which was in the parade building, and like I stated at the beginning, this was the return of The Walking Dead, No Safe Haven. The horror hits relentlessly from all sides. Stay alert. Walkers could trap you anywhere along your journey, from Woodbury to the Derelict prison. Now, this house at the end, of course, had the whole prison facade, and it was cool. It was a decent house. It was an okay Walking Dead house, if I'm being completely honest with you. I did not hate this one. And now we're going to go from a Walking Dead house in all 10 houses into the streets. And well, these street experiences were a little weird because similar to last year, similar to 12, it was no set scare zone. However, it kind of was. It is The Walking Dead, The Undead Streets. For the first time ever, The Walking Dead has overtaken the streets of Universal Studios from Atlanta through the forest and onto Woodbury. You'll have to fight your way through some of the most iconic locations in the show if you want to survive the night. So these streets, to me, in my opinion, were honestly the downfall of The Walking Dead. Now I know it was only year 2, but this is really what made people not like the whole property altogether. It was fun to see. It was the streets. You got to walk through different locations. However, if they would have just done one scare zone based off of this and the other 4 based off of something else, I feel like people would have enjoyed it a little bit more. But due to the fact that it literally took over the entire event, some people were just not happy. And now going from the street experiences to the shows, we have the Rocky Horror Picture Show, a tribute, and the time-traveling duo of Bill and Ted in Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure. And that's that for HHN 23. And now we're going to bounce from 23 to 24. And now HHN 24 ran from September 19th and ended November 1st. So I had a similar run to the last 2 years. And well, this year, of course, like I've said in the past 2, has featured The Walking Dead coming back. But one cool thing about this is that it is the first year since 2011 to feature scare zones again. And that is official scare zones, not just street experiences. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about the haunted houses. Now, location A is From Dusk Till Dawn, and based on the hit El Rey Network TV series, chaos reigns inside this remote bike bar as chaos okay. Based on the hit El Rey Network TV series, chaos reigns inside this remote biker bar. As you discover, it's filled with an ancient race of bloodthirsty creatures. The ordeal will leave you drained in more ways than one. Now, this house was really cool in the fact that it was based on the TV series of a show that was a movie. Now, going from A to B, we have The Walking Dead at the end of the line. Now, this is one of the best Walking Dead houses we've ever had at Horror Nights, in my opinion. And it is, and I quote, "In the largest haunted house Universal Orlando has ever created up to date, you'll journey through most recent season of AMC's The Walking Dead. From the prison from the prison on your way to Terminus, dodging flesh-eating walkers every step of the way. And now the facade for this house was Terminus itself. It was kind of cool to see if you really think about it. It was a giant building in the back and a soundstage. It was crazy. And then the end of this house was like gates with strobe lights and zombies everywhere. And now we're gonna go from B to C, which was another reason that I am terrified of puppets, and that is AVP, Alien vs. Predator. Avoid becoming collateral damage in a violent and savage battle between two horrific extraterrestrial species. Whoever wins, we lose. Now this house honestly did not feature much from the movie. This is more of an original take on Alien vs. Predator, because the movie itself isn't too scary, but having the concept of both of these characters at the event was just icing on the cake. And now going from C to D, we have our final soundstage house, and that is Dracula Untold, Reign of Blood. Your demise could come from bloodthirsty vampires or the attacking Turks as you attempt to survive the terrifying journey that turned the one-time hero into Dracula. Now, the one thing to me that was memorable about this house is that it had a beautiful facade, and there was a scene in here, right, where you're walking, and then out of nowhere, you get blasted with air darts. Like, someone says, "Fire!" It's like, it was cool. It was a cool thing. And I wish Horror Nights had more things like this, and they have been doing some unique things as of late. So I will say, maybe we'll see something similar to this coming back. Who knows? Now, we go to E, which was in the disaster queue, and it was Giggles and Gore Inc. Evil clowns are not born, they're made. The joke's on you as you explore an abandoned factory where body parts fly and evil clowns are assembled from what's left. Now, this house was a very unique haunted house, and it didn't seem too crazy, but the more I walked through this house, the more you realize how really awesome it was. And honestly, seeing the creation of clowns, and then seeing a lot of Easter eggs to other clowns, Jack, and seeing his blender was really cool. Like, it was a perfect blend of nostalgia and something brand new. And speaking of nostalgia, for the very first time ever, in Location F, in the Sprung Tent, we have Halloween. Follow in Michael Myers' footsteps as he begins his horrific night of horror. John Carpenter's classic horror film comes to life, just as yours is coming to an end. And this was obviously the very first time that we saw Michael Myers at Halloween Horror Nights Orlando. And let's just say, it was one to remember. It's still talked about to this day. And now going from F to G, we have Dollhouse of the Damned. For those who enter, risk becoming one of the unfortunate souls with no hope of escape, surviving the malicious dolls who wait inside and will be anything but child's play. And that's funny because Chucky was in the house too, but he wasn't like a featured thing, he was just like a hidden character in the house. And then finally going from G to H, we have Roanoke Cannibal Colony. The inhabitants of this lost Virginia colony have resorted to cannibalism to survive. Take a trip back in time and explore the remains of this settlement where you'll get a lesson in history that you'll never forget. And those are all the haunted houses. So we're gonna go to the scare zones now, and this is where it gets really fun. So we go I, which was located in the front Plaza of the Stars, Avenue of the Stars, now known as Minion Land. We have Masquerade Unstitched. At this masquerade ball, when the masks come off, you'll find that beauty may be skin deep, but horror oozes much deeper. Then in J, over in New York, we have the Purge Anarchy. Once you enter the Purge Anarchy, you will be lucky to just survive the night. In this unique experience, inspired by Universal Pictures' new thriller, turmoil and pandemonium awaits those vulnerable to mass vigilantes in search of new victims. And then K, we have, this is over in the Central Park, we have Bayou of Blood. Venture into the Louisiana Bayou, where practitioners of voodoo are seeking unwilling victims for the night's ritual sacrifice. Which the sad thing about this is that halfway through the run, not even halfway through the run, about like 2 weeks in, they got rid of the sacrifice that they had here. So, it was really sad, but it was a really cool experience. And now going into the final thing here, we have an IP, which means we had 2 IP scare zones and 2 originals. This one is Face Off in the Flesh. Find yourself surrounded by twisted and gruesome creatures created by some of the most talented and up-and-coming makeup artists today. And then of course we have the 2 shows, which were the Rocky Horror Picture Show and the 2 time-traveling boys in Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure. And with that, that concludes the history of the Walking Dead years. Now, of course, it went on to 25 and 26, but those years are for someone else to talk about today. And well, if you guys enjoyed this, let us know down below. Did you enjoy the Walking Dead houses? I know I did. Not all of them, but I enjoyed some of them. With all that being said, stay excellent, my dudes.
Did you miss me?
After years with no icon, Jack was back. Now it's finally time to talk about the first year I attended the event, Halloween Horror Nights 25. The event took place in Universal Studios Orlando and was the 3rd anniversary event since Week 16 and 20 Years of Fear. HHN fans grew kind of tired of The Walking Dead for many years, so this bring back of the original Jack the Clown icon was kind of a fan service. Even more of a fan service was that Ghostface and Scream were originally supposed to be at this event as a house, but the rights to the Ghostface mask and the Scream movie got lost last minute. But there is a commercial out there with Jack and all the other houses at the event that included Ghostface in it, and I think it's pretty sick.
Looks like I win. Again. Why not? Did you miss me?
But where is Jack now in the lore? We found out in 20 Years of Fear that he is one of Fear's minions. But after scaring guests for over 10 years, Jack was revealed to be the embodiment of chaos, a servant for the greatest freak of all, Adaru, along with death, vengeance, mythos/legend, and sacrifice. Chaos was eventually brought back into the hellish fires of the Lantern, where he and the other Horror Nights characters were born. An anonymous figure whose whereabouts are still unknown freed Chaos and all of the Brethren of Tomes, but Adaru seemed to be still inside. While the entity went off on her own path, Jack saw this opportunity to betray his master. Despising what Horror Nights has become to him, hence The Walking Dead, he set off to take back Horror Nights with a vengeance and present a new version of the Dark Fantastic. Another character that was very prominent in HHN 25 was Jack's sidekick Chance. She was featured before in HHN 17, but didn't have as much flair or as much of a fan base. To me, this personally was one of the best years of Halloween Horror Nights, and I'll tell you why. Let's get into the houses. Jack presents 25 years of monsters and mayhem set in Soundstage 21. Jack is back to bring some of the most terrifying moments over the past 25 years of Halloween Horror Nights. Some past houses with scenes include The Forsaken, Scream House, Nightingale's Blood's Prey, and Gothic. An American Werewolf in London set in Soundstage 22. Step into John Landis's landmark 1981 horror classic. From the attack on the English Moors to the bone-crunching transformation, it's one of the most popular houses in Halloween Horror Nights history. Freddy vs. Jason set in Soundstage 24. From the cursed Camp Crystal Lake to the nightmarish 1428 Elm Street. Awake or asleep, you'll find yourself caught in the middle of this epic battle, where the winner's reward is you. Body Collector's Recollection set in Soundstage 24 as well. The body collectors have returned, descending upon Shady Brook Asylum to collect the human parts they require. Screams echo the hallways as a blizzard rages outside while blades whirl inside. Run, Blood, Sweat, and Fears, set in the disaster queue. You've just been selected as a contestant on Run, a brutal TV show where everyday people are stalked by skilled assassins. Just remember, the more horrifying your death, the higher the ratings. The Purge set in Sprung Tent 1. This year's Purge is more brutal than ever. From the moment you step inside the house, dozens of vicious vigilantes will descend upon you as they exercise their right to purge. Asylum in Wonderland 3D set in the Shrek Theater. Follow the White Rabbit through the looking glass into a murderous 3D wonderland. Is the world all in Alice's mind, or are the images we see real enough to kill us? And unfortunately, The Walking Dead, The Living and the Dead, set in the Parade Warehouse. I'm joking, I don't hate The Walking Dead years. From the burnt ashes of Terminus through the flooded community food bank basement and into the darkened churchyard, hordes of walkers surround you as you relive gut-wrenching moments of the most recent season. Insidious set in Sprung Tent 2. Enter the Further and travel through all three parts of the Insidious saga. Creatures of the afterlife try to find their way back to the world using the living to guide them. The house isn't haunted, we are. And this year was also really well done with its scare zones. Psychoscarapy Unleashed set in New York. Icons HHN set in Hollywood. Scary Tales Scream Punk set in the Plaza of the Stars. Evil Roots set in Central Park, and the All Night Die-In double feature set in San Francisco. One prominent memory I have from this year's event was Jack's show. The carnage returns at Mel's Drive-In Stage. Jack the Clown is taking Halloween Horror Nights back in a blaze of murderous mayhem with his army of feared followers and his companion and carnage, Chance. Remember, Jack always has the last laugh. For me, stepping into this unknown world of Halloween Horror Nights for the first time in HHN 25 really cemented me as a lifelong fan. But with Jack comes Chance. So let's pass this down to my good friend Kevin to talk about Halloween Horror Nights 26.
Lock me away. It's all just a show. I'll make you pay. And won't let you go. While Jack's away, it's my turn to dance. My turn to play. You won't stand a chance.
Now guys, it is time for Halloween Horror Nights 26. Now the slogan for that year was, "You won't stand a
Chance. Because Chance was actually the icon of HHN 26. Now this was a sequel year to HHN 25, kind of continuing the story of Jack and Chance. This year's HHN was supposed to start September 16th, run through October 31st, but Hurricane Matthew hit because Universal Studios planted corn. Due to Hurricane Matthew canceling the event on October 6th and 7th, they extended HHN to end on November 5th, so you got a little bit of extra spooky season into November. Now let's give a little backstory behind the icon that year. Chance. Now Chance is the right-hand woman to the famous HHN icon, Jack the Clown. Chance helped him torture people during the stage shows. Though it was revealed during her icon year through promotional material that she also seems to resent playing second fiddle to Jack. Chance is shown to be quite happy-go-lucky, even manic at the times, and most often has a childlike false innocence and speaks in a squeaky voice. She is excitable and almost always grinning manically and smirking. She enjoys telling jokes and puns, even when no one is laughing. Chance, however, is prone to fits of intense rage and can turn on a dime from a bubbly chatter to furious screaming and back again. He, in many ways, fits giggly asylum patient clown archetype. Like many Halloween Horror Nights icons, Chance has quite a taste for blood and is shown gleefully carrying out activities of gruesome murders. Chance is also skilled in knife throwing, as we see in the Carnage Returns, though she states she is not trained professionally. She also seems to enjoy riling up people and watching them scream and squirm, which is particularly seen in the Carnage Returns, which she taunts her and Jack's victims, particularly Amanda. She also appears to enjoy being worshipped, and Jack's maniacs seem to fawn over her. After Jack the Clown and Chance on last year's Carnage Returns, they both got caught. Jack got put away in his box, while Chance got put away in an asylum. While she was incarcerated, Chance entered the theater of her mind, which meant a gothic nightmare occurred in her mind would soon become a horrific reality. So the houses for this year were a lot of fun. I really enjoyed them. The first one was the American Horror Story. Relive scene after scene of sinister threats from Murder House, Freak Show, and Hotel in this terrifying house. Now this happened in Soundstage 19. Now the next house was Halloween, Hell Comes to Haddingfield. Michael Myers is still alive and out there for blood in this all-new house. Now this is going to be in the Parade Warehouse. Now the next house is Tomb of the Ancients. The description for Tomb of the Ancients was, mortal beings of the ancient past have returned to rule mankind. Do you dare disturb? Now this was in Sprung Tent number 1 this year. And then we had another classic horror movie house, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But the description for this year's Texas Chainsaw Massacre was experience every scene, every kill, every bone-chilling rev of the chainsaw from the original masterpiece. Now this was in Sprung House Tent number 2, if I remember correctly, and I think at the end of the house there was Leatherface there with a chainsaw that would chase you out. Now Chance's house, right, every kind of like HHN icon kind of gets their own house. So she got Lunatic's Playground 3D. You won't stand a chance. Step into Chance's realm where the lines between her twisted delusions and reality are continuously blurred. They also had another classic horror movie film represented as a house this year. It was The Exorcist. So the description for the Exorcist house was, go inside the mind of a tormented girl, possessed by evil. It will leave you haunted. Now this was kind of a very disturbing house to see Reagan's head spinning, and it did give me a little bit of nightmares going home that night. Now a fan favorite Halloween Horror Nights house is Ghost Town, and they had it this year. The Curse of the Lightning Gulch. They came looking for gold. Instead, they found death and destruction. Now their doomed souls seek others to join them. Now this house is such a fan favorite that you'll see a lot of kind of Easter eggs and nods to this house pop up in different Halloween Horror Nights houses throughout the years because everybody just loved Ghost Town so much. They did celebrate Christmas in October because they had the Krampus house this year. The description for Krampus is, as a blizzard rages outside, St. Nicholas's evil counterpart has his band of dark minions claim the souls of the faithless one by one. This was in the Shrek Theater that year. Now we've gotten to the point in the video where if you hear the word Walking Dead, hopefully you're taking a shot, because guys, we had another Walking Dead house this year. I'm sure you've heard Walking Dead a lot in the past probably 10 or 20 minutes. So the description for the Walking Dead house this year was, face relentless threats, starting from the beginning of the series to the last season's most unforgettable moments. Now the Walking Dead house was in Soundstage 24 that year. They also had a thing called the Repository. It was like this kind of paid ticket thing where you could experience virtual reality, but there was like live scare actors and sets. And fun little fact, it was kind of the first little test run for the Universal creative team before they made the great movie escape at Universal City Walk. Kind of that themed immersive experience experience. That was their first little test run. So it's a fun little fact about the repository. I never got to do it, sadly. I really wish I did that year. Now it's time to talk about the scare zones for Halloween Horror Nights 26. The first scare zone we're gonna talk about is Survive or Die. Apocalypse. Rival gangs fight for dominance after a global catastrophe has ruined Earth's atmosphere. Join them or meet your doom. Now that scare zone was inside New York that year. And then one of the greatest scare zones I think of all time, Vamp 55. It's up there on my top 10 for the scare zones that I really enjoy. The description for Vamp 55 is, it's Hollywood's high school's 1955 homecoming parade, and the greasers have shown up with fangs as sharp as their switchblade. This stream was just like much fun. I really wish I could like relive it again. Now the next scare zone we're gonna talk about is Layers of the Banshee. Evil spirits and horrific creatures roam free in this dark hollow deep in the forest. Now this was located inside Central Park that year. Then we also had another classic scare zone, Dead Man's Wharf. The spirits of the dead fishermen lost to the seas return to make this dock earn its morbid nickname. This street was just beautiful, such a vibe to like walk through and experience. And then that kind of spawned then the house, which you'll hear about in a little bit. There were two shows this year. Academy of Villains, House of Fear. This was gonna be at the Mel's Drive-In stage. And the hurricane kind of messed up the stage, so they like rebuilt it. Join the high energy performance troupe of inmates in an explosion of insanity and will thrust you into a realm of mayhem and terror. Featuring dance and special acts, the show must go on. And then they also had an HHN classic, Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure. Now this was located inside the Fear Factor stage. No Halloween Horror Nights would be complete without these excellent dudes. The Wild Stallions return with an all new Halloween adventure. So guys, that is the end of Halloween Horror Nights 26. It is time to head off and talk about Halloween Horror Nights 27. Now the little slogan for that year was, your soul is requested. They even like put it on the back of the hat. Now the icon of that year was Bone. You can see him kind of on the merchandise. The event opened on September 16th and ran till November 4th that year. Now it is time to talk about all the houses that they had that year. They had American Horror Story Volume 2, located inside Soundstage 21. American Horror Story Volume 2, experience 3 horrific stories in one disturbing house as a deranged cast of characters seek not only your life, but your soul. Now the next house we're gonna talk about, this is my favorite horror film, The Shining, a classic. So they actually made a Shining house this year, and I was over the moon walking through it. Now this was located inside Soundstage 22. The visually intense psychological thriller is known for the most terrifying haunted experience imaginable. Now the next house we're gonna talk about is Ash vs. Evil Dead. This was based on the Evil Dead television show. It was actually really good. So Ash vs. Evil Dead was located inside the Parade Warehouse. You'll howl with terror and laughter as you witness Ash battle demons and deadites armed with his fueled chainsaw. Now this was kind of known as like kind of the funny house for HHN that year. There was a fun little gag when you're kind of exiting. I think Ash had his like chainsaw and he would hit a keg and it would kind of like spray you a little bit as a last little scare. Now the next house we're gonna talk about was located inside the Shrek Theater, and the house was called Saw Games of Jigsaw. The traps are set, all that's missing is you. The Jigsaw Killer has returned to torment you with his twisted take on poetic justice. We also had a Horrors of Blumhouse this year. It was located inside the Men in Black tent. From the minds behind Insidious, Sinister, and The Purge comes to the Horrors of Blumhouse. Now the next house we're gonna talk about is Dead Waters. This is one of my personal favorites. This was located inside Soundstage 24, a swamp that oozes evil in a hellish realm of the Voodoo Queen. If you fail to escape, you're in for a gut-wrenching sacrifice. Now this house was really cool because there was like a boat and the boat was like tilted and you're walking through it. It was such a beautiful house to walk through. The next house that we're gonna talk about is The Fallen. This was also located inside Soundstage 24. You're about to be caught in the crossfire of the eternal war of light versus dark. No one will be safe. The next house we're gonna talk about is Hive. Now Hive was located inside Sprung Tent number 2. The crumbling house of a 19 Hemingway Lane harbors a nest of bloodthirsty vampires. If you awaken them, you will face a savage, beastly hunger. Now the next house, they just redid for Halloween Horror Night last year out in Hollywood. It is Scarecrow the Reaping. This is one of my favorite houses of all time. It was just so terrifying to go through. There was just so many different scares in there that you weren't safe. There was a scare in there for everyone. So Scarecrow the Reaping has gone down in a lot of people's lists as #1 of the scariest houses of all time for Halloween Horror Nights. So this was going to be located inside Sprung Tent #1 at a long abandoned Depression-era farm. Vengeance takes root, and only the harvest that will be reaped is you. Now it's time to talk about all the scare zones that they had this year. They had Altars of Horror. This was located inside the Plaza of the Stars. Altars of the Horror. Enter the Nexus of Evil, where all the fearsome characters and nefarious creatures from each of the Halloween Horror Nights haunted houses lie and wait. The next scare zone we're going to talk about is Festival of the Deadliest. Now for Festival of the Deadliest, it was located inside Hollywood. The description was, the dead are throwing a hell of a Hollywood party and you're invited. Your spirit will fuel the frenzy of this ghoulish gathering. The next scare zone is a lot of people's favorites. It was Invasion. So Invasion was located inside San Francisco. The year is 1955. A UFO has crashed into the wharf. Their goal, to conduct experiments upon you to prepare to invade Earth. Now going from one of the best scare zones to, they had The Purge. The Purge scare zone was located inside New York. The Purge has returned to Halloween Horror Nights and overrun New York. No one is safe. Be part of a proud American tradition. Unite, we purge. Now another great scare zone from that year was Trick or Treat. This was located inside Central Park. Break the rules, pay the price. That's a murderously moral of the 5 twisted stories in Trick or Treat, a darkly hilarious tribute to Halloween. Now we will see the Trick or Treat kind of IP show up in a house coming up. They also had a Bill and Ted Excellent Halloween Adventure. It was located again inside the Fear Factor stage. After 26 years of excellent Halloween adventures, Bill and Ted are bringing their farewell tour to Halloween Horror Nights. People waited out for hours to experience that final show of Bill and Ted. They also had Academy of Villains come back this year for Academy of Villains Afterlife. Witness the intense and shocking dance performance of this world-class group of artists as you discover what happens after we leave this life. Now it is time to head off to Halloween Horror Nights 28, where the slogan of that year was,
"We know what scares you." Horror Nights 28 would become a historic year for the event, not only featuring more nights than ever before, running from September 14th through November 3rd, but also more houses. HHN 28 was the very first year that we had 10 houses to experience at the event, alongside 5 scare zones, 2 roaming hordes, a stellar show, and of course the returning tribute store.
The theme for that year's event was the gnarly decade of the 1980s, which had some IPs, of course, released from that decade. Now, the 10 houses that we had featured at this year's event were some of the most well put together houses at HHN, and this is considered to be one of the strongest overall years that we've had in recent history.
Out of the 10 houses, 5 of them were originals, being Scary Tales, Deadly Ever After, Carnival Graveyard, Rest in Pieces, Dead Exposure, Patient Zero, Seeds of Extinction, which was housed in B108 the first time this location was used, and the fan favorite Slaughter Cinema.
Then we have our 5 IPs, which were Trick or Treat, The Horrors of Blumhouse, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, Poltergeist, and one of the most anticipated houses of that year, Stranger Things.
Now, like Brian said earlier, this was probably one of the best lineups that we've had for houses in recent history. All of the houses on the lineup for this year were really, really strong, and almost all of them were just great houses. They were beautiful, they were put together really well, and we had some really amazing IPs.
Yeah, the one thing I really want to mention when it comes to these houses was the announcement season we had leading up. We had such a great announcement season for HHN 28. Everything was perfectly timed out and spaced out leading up to the event. It wasn't like we were waiting so long for something to come around. So the announcement season was plenty of fun. Speculation season was fun as well. But then we finally got these houses. And I remember when Stranger Things was first announced, like everybody's like, no way. And we all thought this was gonna be the most anticipated house, and sure enough, it was. All the houses were well put together. Stranger Things was as great as we heard. The cast did fantastic on all fronts from any single house you went to, and even Poltergeist was such a surprise with how well they did that house.
Yeah, and the original houses were amazing that year too. Carnival Graveyard was really great, and Slaughter Cinema is definitely a fan favorite. So this year was really, really strong as far as houses go.
But it wasn't just the houses that made this year one for the history books. HHN 28 did feature 5 spectacular scare zones, starting off with The Harvest, which was located in Plaza of the Stars, Revenge of Chucky in the streets of Hollywood, Twisted Tradition over in Central Park, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, which this was in a different location between Transformers and Starbucks called South Street, and then our personal favorites, the Vamp 85 New Year's Eve scare zone, which was in the streets of New York.
Yeah, like Brian said, Vamp 85 is probably our favorite scare zone ever. The feeling, like the atmosphere in that scare zone was just amazing. It was the 80s, the pop icons were all in there, but as vampires, which is just so cool. It was so cool to see all those different characters and everything, and that was just one of the best parts of that year.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna keep saying this, Vamp 85, and we've said this all the time, is our favorite scare zone of all time. I mean, we love the 80s, and this is what this whole year featured, was the 1980s and stuff, but it wasn't just Vamp 85. I mean, we had things like Twisted Tradition, which in Central Park, that's where you had those pictures of all the pumpkins and the trees and stuff, and then the tall, like, walking pumpkins and all. Overall, the scare zones for that year was fantastic. I mean, they all around, I mean, there wasn't really one that I was just like, oh, I don't really like. And we can't even forget, we had Killer Clowns from Outer Space. It was the first time we got Killer Clowns that year, and it was just fantastic, and in a different location than usual.
Yeah, and people loved it so much, we'll get into this later, but people loved it so much that they even brought it back as a house because it was just so loved by everybody.
Halloween Horror Nights 20 only featured one show, which was located in the Fear Factor stage, being Academy of Villains Cyberpunk. This would be the first time that Academy of Villains would be featured in this location, since it was always at one of the pop-up stages in years past. The show had tons of dancing, acrobatics, and some fun theatrics alongside a playlist of some cool synth music. Halloween Horror Nights 28 was one of those years that you just look back at and be like, man, I'm glad that existed, and at least in our shoes, I'm glad we at least got to attend this year. Now, this was everything. We're talking about like the tribute store, the music played, the houses featured, the scare zones featured, the shows, everything that had, even down to the food, was truly remarkable to feature.
Yeah, this is my personal favorite year that I have attended, and it has 2 of my favorite things. My favorite house, which is Slaughter Cinema, and my favorite scare zone, which is Vamp 85. Just like the 80s vibe of the whole year, and especially because it was the first year that we got that sort of like decade and the 80s vibe. It was just amazing.
Yeah, we loved it, and it's something that, you know, we look back on and it's like, man, if we could just have Horror Nights like this all the time, we'd be A-okay with it. And the fans loved it, and that's the thing that we missed about HHN 28. It's just the fact that everybody that talked about it, they knew exactly what was going on, because 28 was the year to be.
From the announcement season, the houses, the scare zones, and the overall event itself, Halloween Horror Nights 28 was truly a spectacular year that we think about almost every single day.
Not only was this just an incredible year within itself, but it also gave birth to the next upcoming event, Halloween Horror Nights 29. Halloween Horror Nights 29, a year full of synth and energy like we've never seen before. The 80s theme would continue once again for HHN 29, with the slogans being "Your worst fears live here" and our personal favorite. This year's event will also feature more nights than ever before, as well as a brand new Lagoon show. Now, HHN 29 did run from select nights between September 6th through November 2nd, and it featured 10 haunted houses, 5 scare zones, 2 incredible shows, a roaming horde, a tribute store, and even for the first time ever, a brand new experience over at Cabana Bay.
Moving into the 10 houses for this year's event, only 4 of them were originals, which were Yeti, Terror of the Yukon, Depths of Fear, Nightingale's Blood Pit, and Graveyard Games.
Then we had 6 IPs featured at the event, which we would argue to be one of the best years and the strongest IPs ever featured at a Halloween Horror Nights event, and those are Stranger Things, Jordan Peele's Us, House of a Thousand Corpses, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, Ghostbusters, and the legendary Universal Classic Monsters.
This was an extremely strong year as far as IP lineups go. We know that Stranger Things was highly anticipated because the first year it was so successful. Now, the second year it wasn't quite as well received, but it still was a Stranger Things house. It still, you know, looked amazing. And then we also had Ghostbusters, which was just beautiful, and Killer Clowns, which we know everybody loves.
Yeah, Ghostbusters was a great house. I mean, who couldn't resist going in and dancing at the beginning with the Ghostbusters theme and all? And then you also had Killer Clowns, which was kind of like your campy type of house that you went in, and it was a bunch of colors and fun and the smell of cotton candy. That was a great immersed house that we had, and believe it or not, that was also like one of the scare zones that we had from HHN 28, like we talked about, and it became a house, and I think we loved it more as a house, but it was just great as a scare zone as well. So having that come back was a fan favorite. We enjoyed that. And then you had a bunch of other good originals. Wasn't the strongest, I would say, in originals compared to what we've had in previous years, but overall, when you look at the general purpose of the houses, I think they were a success, and you cannot forget the classic monsters. The classic monsters in 29, that house was one of my favorites of all time that I've ever witnessed going through any house, and I might be a little biased in that, but this did lead for the monsters to come back to the event in future years.
And of course, you can't just have the houses for it to be HHN, you have to have some scare zones. So our scare zones for HHN 29 were Zombieland Double Tap, located in New York, Rob Zombie Hellbilly Deluxe over in San Francisco, Vikings Undead in Central Park, the upbeat Vanity Ball found in the streets of Hollywood, and finally, probably one of the coolest and most photogenic scare zones of the year, Anarcade in Plaza of the Stars.
Anarcade was easily my favorite scare zone from this year, just for the fact of the music it has. I'm a huge synth fan, if you guys know our channel, obviously, but this was the main scare zone, basically. Like, of course, it went with the theme. You had the arcade machines and the whole game over, and everybody was all like neon and lights and stuff. It's just, the vibe of the scare zone was perfect, and it's something that set the tone for the event. However, though, I wouldn't really say that the scare zones were the strongest for this year, unfortunately.
Yeah, we had Vanity Ball, which was a fan favorite. A lot of people really, really liked Vanity Ball and spent a lot of time in there.
Especially the music in Vanity Ball.
And the music was amazing in there. But we had some other scare zones that, you know, were an interesting idea, like Vikings and Hellbilly Deluxe, but they just didn't have that same vibe. They also didn't have the scare factor that we got in other scare zones in years past.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like Vikings was great. Hellbilly Deluxe from Rob Zombie was fantastic. All the scare zones were good, but they didn't feel like they blended well for the year that it was meant to be, and that's the only thing that threw it off for me. The Zombieland scare zone was cool because you had a bunch of people, obviously a bunch of scare actors roaming around, and it was a lot of fun. They had that giant stage show that they were able to put on, which is kind of cool and all, but really just felt like the scare zones didn't quite hit the mark like we were hoping for. But regardless, to say that these were great scare zones and we did enjoy them, and that's pretty much what we had for them, unfortunately.
Halloween Horror Nights 29 saw the final return of Academy of Villains at the Fear Factor stage. This show was called Altered States and displayed tons of dancing and theatrics, but it wasn't the only show that was offered for HHN 29. Introducing Halloween Marathon of Mayhem.
Now, I absolutely loved the Lagoon show. I mean, just the music in itself, like I said, it's a big synth party in a sense, and of course, you can't go wrong with properties like Ghostbusters, Classic Monsters, and even the Stranger Things property, where they actually had the whole buildings in the background kind of go with the like the title sequence, and it fit well. It was just honestly remarkable. It's something you had to see in person, and the videos are great if you can watch them online, but it's nothing like being in person for the show.
Yeah, this year overall was a great year. They had a lot of really cool like themed food even. They had like the Starcourt Mall from Stranger Things, and a lot of the different themed food really like picked up during this year as well.
Yeah, and also they had the tribute store, which was great, fantastic. The entrance, when you walked up to the entrance, it was full of the banners, had the medallion, it had the music blaring and pumping. Like, the energy of HHN 29 is truly just unmatched in our opinions, because that is something when you think, or at least when we think of Halloween Horror Nights, you walk up to the event, you're crossing that bridge into Universal, and there you go, you have the banners, you have the medallion, you have Universal Studios, Halloween Horror Nights, and you got the music from HHN 29 playing. that year is to me like the foundation of what Horror Nights is about, energy and fun.
And this was also the first year that we had the Cabana Bay pop-up, which was really, really cool. And obviously people love it because they keep doing it year after year. And this was where you could literally go in and it was like you were in the buyer's living room and they had this whole thing where like the lights would turn off and it was just so cool. And to be able to like step into that even though you weren't at HHN is just a really cool like added thing that they had.
Yeah, it seems like HHN 29 was kind of like the template for these past few years we've had because it was very innovative and it seemed like they really reached for the stars when it came to this event. So needless to say, HHN 29 is in our hearts and one of the fan favorites.
The past few years for Halloween Horror Nights have been truly incredible to experience, but little did we know that something unprecedented was heading straight for HHN.
Halloween Horror Nights 30 was set to take place in the fall. All of us fans held our breath and waited for announcements as we were battling a raging pandemic. But the bad news that we knew was coming eventually came. Halloween Horror Nights 30 was canceled for the year. For the first time in the event's history in 30 years, Halloween wouldn't be something that was celebrated at Universal Orlando. Although for those who were lucky enough to go, they did hold a 29.5 HHN with a couple houses for a few days. It honestly was such a sad time to go through a Halloween season without taking a trip down to Universal. But HHN 30 came back with a vengeance in 2021.
Just stop, I won't say a thing, please just let me out. Let me out. Can anybody hear me? Let me out. Let me go.
Universal's Halloween Horror Nights, back for the 30th year of fear. Brace yourself for Netflix's The Haunting of Hill House, Beetlejuice, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and more.
I personally took on a dream I had since I first visited the event in 2015. I went to an open call on a website and I auditioned to be a scare actor at that year's event. Lucky enough, I was casted and I got to experience HHN in a brand new way. HHN 30 did not play. All of the originally crafted icons returned for the 30th year, led by Jack the Clown. He featured in random spots throughout the park, antagonizing guests, and even had his own spots in the house HHN icons captured. This is also the year that during speculation time, HHN kept its fans on their toes, causing all of us to decipher static live streams. The houses were as follow: Puppet Theater, Beetlejuice. One of my all-time favorite houses based on my favorite TV show, The Haunting of Hill House, Universal Monsters, The Bride of Frankenstein Lives, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Revenge of the Tooth Fairy, Welcome to Scary Horror in the Heartland, Case Filed on Earth, The Legendary Truth, The Wicked Grove, Realm of the Pumpkin, and the shining star of the event, HHN, Icons Captured. My wife personally probably marathoned that house about 30 times. The Scare Zone started off with my favorite, Crypt TV, and I might be a little biased on that. It also featured 30 Years, 30 Fears, Seek and Destroy, Gorewood Forest, where the Terror Queen from HHN 15 made good on her promise and returned, and Lights Camera Action, Eddie's Revenge, bringing back Jack's brother Eddie and his iconic chainsaw. This year brought us the first look at a brand new show that replaced Academy of Villains, which was a fiery show called Nightmare Fuel, and that has personally become my wife and I's guilty pleasure every time we visited the event. This was one of the busiest years of HHN. Who knew taking a break between years would bring people back?
We gotta move fast. We're gonna get to all the haunted houses tonight. Food first, then monsters.
Monsters? Guys, relax. None of this is real.
You did not just get pizza fries on my jacket. I'm out.
Guys?
Perfect.
I can't believe you actually enjoy this.
I love this.
Seriously? Fake. Not real. Okay, that's definitely not real.
Best house yet. Oh, awesome.
Step into the horror classic, Halloween. The Weekend. After Hours Nightmare. And more. Summon your Scream Squad to Universal's Halloween Horror Nights.
You say never go alone. Matter of fact, that was the slogan for HHN 30 and the most recent year, HHN 31. This year, HHN brought back something us fans have been missing, a brand new, originally crafted icon. This year's icon was a fan favorite from HHN 30's house, Wicked Growth, the Pumpkin Lord. The Pumpkin Lord grows Halloween, and each year he grows bigger and bigger, gathering and harvesting all the things that make Halloween. He does this with the help of his minions, witches, goblins, and other worldly creatures that go bump in the night. Grown from a twisted heap of malignant vines and pumpkins, begins, the Pumpkin Lord got his power by tricking and enticing people to celebrate Halloween. He draws life from those practicing in the traditions of the season, getting slowly stronger and more imposing until he has guests in his grasp. Fans really gravitated toward the Pumpkin Lord during Halloween Horror Nights 30. The Pumpkin Lord's vines grew throughout all of the houses this year. Universal Monsters Legends Collide, The Horrors of Blumhouse returned featuring Freaky and the Black Phone. The Weekend After Hours Nightmare brought one of the first artist houses back since Alice Cooper. Spirits of the Coven was Hocus Pocus meets The Great Gatsby in a witchy speakeasy. Bugs Eaten Alive brought a lot of people, including my husband's biggest fear, to life at the event in a comedic way with a fan favorite grub. Fiesta de Chupacabras, Hellblock Horror locked you up with the evil monsters of HHN's past. Descendants of Destruction took you underground to see the creatures living in the subways and the caves. And Dead Man's Pier Winter's Wake was one of the most beautifully crafted houses in HHN history. The scare zones were The Horrors of Halloween, Sweet Revenge, which featured a super cute parade gone wrong, Conjure the Dark, Scarecrow, Cursed Soil, and Graveyard Deadly Unrest. I felt really at home in the Sweet Revenge scare zone. Shout out to Madison, and in Graveyard Deadly Unrest. And my favorite, Nightmare Fuel, returned in Wildfire, bringing a nostalgic show that mirrored the first. And HHN 32. Oh wait, that hasn't happened yet.
Yep, that hasn't quite happened yet, but it will in a few months. HHN 32 is approaching very quickly, and from what it seems like, it's gonna be huge again. So that is all of the years of Halloween Horror Nights up until this point. What started in a trailer in the summer of 1990 has become a huge event showcasing horror movies and original ideas and bringing a whole new fandom. A huge thank you to my lovely wife Luna Magic, and to Nerd Squish, to The Hero, to Miss Chloe, to Irish Will, to Losh TV, to Kevin Heimbach, to Brian from Orlando, and Steph. Thank you for agreeing to devote your time and your energy into this deep dive. If you haven't already, make sure you go and check out their content on their respective channels and consider hitting their subscribe buttons. Hope to see all of you creators that have joined me today in the fog so we can marathon some houses this year. And also thank you to Horror Night Nightmares for partnering up with us for this video. For your HHN at Home June event in support of the Trevor Project, please consider donating to support LGBTQI youth. This video essay was a massive thing with a bunch of creators' hard work put into it. So tag Halloween Horror Nights' YouTube down in the comments below if you've made it this far, so we can show Universal just how devoted their fans are. But if you like HHN or horror, whether that is in movies, media, TV, music, games, etc., make sure you subscribe and hit the bell notification icon down below. We are not done with HHN this year. HHN 32 is approaching fast. They just announced The Last of Us. They're probably going to announce something soon again. And we're going to be here covering all of it on the Horror Fiends. There are some Halloween Horror Nights videos that I posted a few days ago, a month ago, 2 months ago, that you can go check out if you haven't already. But besides that, I will see you in the fog, and I will see you in the morgue.